Hello, and welcome to Artificial Developer Intelligence, a conversational podcast where two software engineers navigate the ever-changing AI-enabled software engineering landscape. We're your study buddies who uses AI every day at work and sometimes read a few AI papers at night. I am Shimin Zhang, and with me today is my guest co-host, Rahul. Wait, that isn't Dan talking. Yadav.
Hi,
Rahul,
everybody.
what is your favorite and best Dan impression?
I think not with that attitude is the Dan crypt that, when you talk about your 2 minutes to midnight, you can just do, XYZ is happening and for 30 seconds to midnight, but not with that attitude.
Perfect. I have a strange urge to eat some Skittles right now for some reason. On today's show, we've got our usual news threadmill where we're going to be talking about a couple of articles related to some acquisitions in the AI space, followed by Post of the Week, where we have two articles, one titled Everyone is a Staff Engineer Now, and another a News End 2025 letter. After that, we're going to go to Vibe Intel, where Rahul is going to give us some hard-won experience with working on AI-enabled automation at his company. I should introduce him. Rahul is the Director of Engineering at Functionize. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about what Functionize is and what you do there.
All these thoughts, my own, don't represent Functionizes. So anything I said before this and anything else I'm about to say for the rest of the podcast, my own thoughts.
After that, we're going to do a brief talk about the toolshed, about using Gemini in Chrome and our experience with that. Next, we will be talking about 2 minutes to midnight, where as per custom, we will discuss where we are on the AI doom atomic nuclear clock. So let us get started. All right, first up, we have the news that Groq has been purchased by Nvidia. This is coming from the Substack, More Than More, but it has also been making its round around the news lately. So the news that has happened last week during the Christmas holiday weekend was that Nvidia has paid $20 billion for the chip manufacturer Groq, and it is taking on all of its IP license as well as the entire team. So this is kind of a acqui-hire situation.
Yeah.
Now, if you've not heard of Groq, have you heard of Groq, Rahul?
Not until this acquisition for 20 billion's worth. I think I'd seen their name here or there in some newsletters, but didn't really look into it until before this.
Yeah, I think in our day-to-day, we don't spend that much time with the low-level GPU manufacturers. Groq was is a company founded in 2016 that creates LPUs, or language processing units, a specialized type of chips that are created to efficiently process large language models. The company was founded by Jonathan Ross, who was a part of Google's original tensor processing unit team. So with this 20 billion purchased, Nvidia has purchased both their new LPU design, the second generation that just came out this year, along with the entire team. What I found interesting about the acquisition is that Nvidia decided to not incorporate the company into Nvidia, but keeping them as a separate entity entirely. Mm-hmm. So Groq will remain an independent company that holds its own IP, along with continuing its existing deals using its Groq Cloud product.
I think it is interesting in the sense that in the future, if you're not embedding something when you acquire the talent, in the future, either Nvidia assesses their technology from the bottom up and decides yes, this was, there was something here, but we're on a better path, or we can take up this market with what we've been working on. Or it could be that they end up selling this to someone else, and keeping this separate and clean might be the way to do it. I don't know if Nvidia wants to sell anything to anyone. I was Like I was listening to, have you heard of the founders of podcast? He did a whole one on Jensen Huang. Uh, uh,
No,
Jensen,
I haven't.
like, oh yeah, it's really good. The Jensen one and Elon Musk one, he's done two of like how Jensen works, how Elon works.
Mm.
Those two are very good. Jensen, many years, maybe even like a decade or two ago, was talking about Intel's gonna kill us. So instead, I'm just gonna go and kill Intel. And I
Mm.
see, like, when I see stuff like that, that's what I think of. And like, and Nvidia was nothing back then when he was saying, yeah, we're gonna kill Intel in the long term. And like, obviously, it's much more likely today they're investing in Intel and everything. So it's interesting from that perspective that even with the acquisition, they're deciding to keep it separate. I think part of it could be also like the third take on this could be you want the big companies always like aspirationally spin up these like smaller departments that can move faster and run faster. And so that could be the third thing that they acquired it, but they don't want it to operate in how fast Nvidia moves. It's still like, tens
Right.
of thousands of people there. Maybe they want them to keep them lean and give them the fuel they want.
Yeah, that's kind of how my take on this is. I don't think this is an acquire to kill situation, and I
Yeah.
don't necessarily think this is an acquire to sell situation, since like what is money to Nvidia right now? It's meaningless. And so the Groq chips has no DDR or HBM, so they're fast but with limited memory capacity.
Hmm.
So they are fast, they're good at inference, but they seem to be very, very different architecturally from what NVIDIA is currently producing. And maybe the integration would be both difficult and also kind of kill the specialness of Groq. So in that sense, I think, yeah, it makes sense. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, pretty crazy. 20 billion.
20 billion. It's pocket change these days. What is speaking of pocket change, Facebook, or I should say Meta, buys Manus to bolster its agentic AI skill set. Let me see if I can. Do we know how much they pay for Manus? This also came out last week. So, for a little background, this was one of the first AI agent companies, kind of even before Claude Code and when we were still trying to find out what agents mean in 2025. I remember reading about their development blogs about the lessons they learned in building agents. And they build general agents that kind of is meant to do everything for the user as opposed to specialized agents, like Claude Code. They have some interesting demos for using their Manus agent to find apartments for a particular city based on goodness of schools. They can also use it for HR purposes. A very general AI agent company with, according to Manus, 100 million ARR, and they were only maybe 10, 11 month old. And they've already processed more than 147 trillion tokens this year on 80 million virtual computers. So very impressive numbers. Seems to be a very popular general agentic tool for consumers, and Meta got to them.
I looked up in Gemini to your question of like how much did they pay for it? It says the value was 2.5 to 3 billion,
Okay.
which 20 times multiple is what 2 billion would be. Given how hot AI is, this almost seems undervalued. I don't know, right?
What is money?
Yeah, exactly. But like if you look at some of the other companies with 100 million in ARR, they are valued way beyond 2 billion. And so it is interesting that Meta was able to get them for like 2 to 3 billion. I think there is also some piece of, one of the things that Gemini calls out is like Manus is shuttering all the mainland China operations and moved entirely to Singapore and everything. So I wonder if there's something there that led to less value or something.
Right, yeah, I didn't mention that Manus is based in Singapore,
Yep.
which it's kind of I'm not sure if this is a proof that Meta is relatively desperate to get those users, or get their agents in front of users' eyeballs, that they have to, go all the way to Singapore to purchase a agent startup.
Yeah.
But I definitely feel like out of all the big FANG companies, Meta feels behind to me in terms of their reach, right? Like they were the pioneers of the Llama open weight models, but basically the Chinese models have ate their lunch. No one's using Llama 4s. They
Yep.
came out this
Yep.
year and I feel like I haven't heard about them at all. Like everyone's using Quinn or DeepSeek or even Kimi.
Yep. Yep.
Meta feels very behind. So in addition to that, I personally have never used any of Meta's AI features. I mean, I still have Facebook, I still have WhatsApp, I even still have Instagram. I have personally not used any Meta AI features.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they're going to reach consumers if N of 1 is of any indication.
Yeah. There is this kind of like very, loosely tied to this. I was looking at a small business where the pastor gives their sermon and everything, and the business is to take all of that and create social media posts so that they can have an outreach across all these different things. And so
Right.
it's not I don't know, if you look at the them as a small like entity, the church as an entity, it at least makes sense to me that they're you would pay some money to be able to like, oh, I want to be on all the different platforms and everything and build my congregation that way.
Yep.
For individuals using it, at what point does everything just become slop if everybody's using the same products to write the same or similar things? Because they tend to favor some things over the others, like M dash until recently, and then like the word delve I was reading was one of the favorite ones of the models. So it's like, how much does Meta pushing this actually take away from the diversity of posts that would actually make it a better social media platform?
Yeah, it makes sense for them to just stick Manus into their existing UI, and now we have AI slop everywhere, more so than they already. I'm like, my Facebook feed is basically slop central at this point, and
Yep.
it's just gonna get even sloppier in the new year. As someone who used M dash, I'm an OG M dash user. I'm looking at my notes right now. I see like M dashes. I'm kind of offended that all M's have taken my lunch.
You used to use it on your own, like you would use the M dash, not just like, I don't know, there's the regular dash hyphen, but
Yep.
then I've rarely seen people use the dash. I don't even know how I don't know how one puts it on there, like what the key is for that.
M dash, well, you do dash dash and it converts automatically to M dash.
Oh, okay.
Lots of editors. The M dash is for people who love run-on sentences like I do.
Yep.
It's a replacement for parentheses. I also love to do parentheses
Yep. Yep.
between my sentences, so it just serves the same purpose, but looks a little better.
Yeah.
Still the same, ADHD brain at work. All right, moving on. Our next topic is Andre Karpathy's tweet that came out on December 26th. And I'm going to read the entire tweet. I guess it's X now, from beginning to end, because I thought that encapsulates a lot of how software developers are feeling right now. Quote, "I've never felt this much behind as a programmer. The profession is being dramatically refactored as bits contributed by the programmers are increasingly sparse and between. I have a sense that I could be 10 times more powerful if I just properly string together what has become available over the last year, and the failure to claim the boost feels decidedly like a skill issue. There are new programmable layers of abstractions to master, in addition to the usual layers now involving agents, subagents, their prompts, context, memory, modes, permissions, tools, plugins, skills, hooks, MCP, LSP, /commands, workflows, IDE integration, and the need to build an all-encompassing mental model for strength and pitfalls of a fundamentally stochastic, fallible, unintelligible, and changing entities suddenly intermingled with what used to be good old-fashioned engineering. Clearly, some powerful alien tool was handed around, except it comes with no manual, and everyone has to figure out how to hold it and operate it, while the resulting magnitude 9 earthquake is rocking the profession. Roll up your sleeves to not fall behind. Can I just say, Andre, I love him, but he could have used a couple of M dashes in that very long tweet. It would really help breaking up the that long string of wall of text there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this crystallizes. And of course, Andre, he invented vibe coding. We talk about him on this podcast. He is not only a researcher, but also a great teacher. He was at OpenAI for a while. If anyone has reasons to, rest on their laurels and feel like, hey, I'm up to date, it would be him. And even he feels like he could be a 10 times more productive engineer if he just knows how. That crisis moment, that feeling, I think is real and is permeating within the entire industry. Do you see that at your day-to-day job? Maybe not you directly.
Yeah, definitely. He's one of the most prominent AI people in the world. He's worked at, all these companies that we admired, done some really cool stuff. And yet, some of the things he feels are the same things we feel. We're not so different in how we're feeling about what's happening in the industry right now. So at least it was like maybe a bit comforting to be like, hey, this guy is supposed to know everything before it even comes out and becomes public, but he's struggling to keep up and catch up. And so I think that's definitely true. To me, I see that a little bit in the day to day where you would see there were agents, then you have skills, then you have specs and everything. And the problem is at the end of the day, you still have to, and there's kind of this like balance that you have to walk where you don't want to fall so far behind that you're still using outdated technology or something, where you're like, this is just a fundamentally, you're not using containerization or something. Where it's
Right.
like, why won't you do this? But then the other side is the field is changing so fast that if you adopt every single thing, there's not even a guarantee that all of that would be supported across these different agents and models and everything, because they're trying to figure these things out themselves. And so to me, part of that also comes down to, regardless of like how shiny the new way to do things is or how shiny this thing is, what are the core problems that you need to solve, your company needs to solve, and how best are these being solved today, and like how much of a what order of magnitude improvement would you get from these if you're just like, it's for like, hey, it's fun, it's slightly better, but most of your things are still the same. It doesn't really matter as much, and it might be better to just not adopt every single thing that comes out. On the other hand, if you can fundamentally unlock something using, say, Claude skills or something that you could not before. You can spin up multiple agents at the same time. And now you've, X'd your productivity by a few factors, then that's definitely worth spending some time on. And part of it is like you have to go at these things at your own pace, and um, the job you're in, we were talking about GPUs and stuff. You mentioned earlier how we don't really dig deeper into like the low level details of GPUs and everything. And part of it is just because we're not in the like manufacturing, the research side of the industry. If I were a researcher, I very much want to stay up to date on what's happening in the field, because some of it might just leave my research redundant to a certain extent, or I might have to take that into factor as I'm researching certain ways of doing something. On the other hand, like if there are some new things that are happening that don't fundamentally change how I build software day in and day out, how much do I need to make sure that I know about it, and I'm 100% into it every single day. So part of it is like, it's about the long game, and you have to go at these things at your own pace.
You're the hot takes guy. And that is a very reasonable, calm, like, hold on, like it's okay to wait and see, and put your eyes on the ball of making your job more productive, and take the bits as they come, kind of a solution
Yeah.
there.
there's like, if I can add a couple other things. After I read this, everybody's been drawing comparisons to the Industrial Revolution and everything. And so I was looking up, and I don't know about cars much or anything. Before I say that, we'll start there. My car drives itself, so what would I know
Hmm.
about what's going on inside? I was looking up like when was the steam engine or the modern car engine created, and then Gemini with like the car engine came from the steam engine, so we're talking about the first engine, which was created in 1769. It led to the first car engine in 1860. So you're talking almost 90 years later from like that engine to the one you could make smaller, you can make more efficient, that you could put it into cars. And then I was like, okay, took about 90 years to get there. When was the latest significant improvement made to a car engine? And I didn't know what significant improvement looks like. So I was like, it can define it itself. And then it was like last significant improvement was pushing the thermal efficiency of these engines past 40%, which is
Hmm.
apparently really hard. And so they did this like in the 2020s, so within the last 5 years or so. So you're talking about like 250 years from the engine being created to us still making it thermally efficient and eking out all these efficiencies. That's as long as US has been around. And, this will be our 250 years of existence as a country. And so you can't really ever catch up to these things that will just lead to, I don't know, sadness to a certain extent. And so you kind of have to figure out what are the parts that you're really focused on, and then really like what really ties into your craft and really focus on that versus trying to absorb the whole industry. Is just as Andre is, showing us, he's supposed to know everything. And if he can't keep up, then what chance do the rest of us have?
That's true. That's why I've been crying so much at my desk lately. I will say that I do have to say, for my personal projects, to the extent that I have personal projects on the side, I've almost completely moved over to vibe coding, for some
Yeah,
definition of vibe coding or agent assisted programming. Even if at work I'm not 100% switched over yet.
yeah,
Yeah, it's okay to do some combination of the two. You don't have to go one way or another,
yeah.
and buy plenty of tissues for the days when you feel like you're super behind.
Yeah.
All right. On this week's tool shed, we are going to be talking about Gemini in Chrome. Rahul, this is your topic. You want to talk a little bit about your Gemini in Chrome experience?
Yeah, I had read about Gemini in Chrome, I think couple months ago at this point. We in the US didn't have access to it. I think US was still the first country where this got rolled out, but in phases. And so I got access to it maybe 6-ish weeks ago or something like that.
Hmm.
But it is probably one of the tools that I use most at work these days. But Gemini in Chrome is if you haven't used it or hasn't rolled out to you yet, for anyone listening, it's on the right side of your Chrome browser. You would see this little Gemini icon. If you're a Chrome user, that you can use, and the critical thing that it does is it takes Gemini, the whole like chat experience and everything, but it is able to share your screen with that. And so one of the missing pieces of all these things, when you've chatted with, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever, is I'm trying to do XYZ. It's like, okay, based on what you're saying, and we're only like, it's not like we can describe everything in our situation with perfect fidelity. So it's always like, help me do this. And then it's like, okay, here's my rough guess on what you're trying to ask me. Here's my answer to it. But this adds context, which has
Hmm.
made everything so much better. Like I feel much more productive these days when I need to like change different settings, set up APIs, set up all sorts of like access permissions and everything. I don't have to go and figure out what's in the docs or ask the agents to like go look the docs for me or anything. I can share my tab with Gemini and Chrome. It knows exactly the screen I'm looking at. And then it's like, oh yeah, these are the settings that you should be concerned about. Or this is how you set up XYZ workflow or anything. And so it's been a game changer. I use it every single day at work, multiple times a day. I've started using it for just some like random things at home as well, where it's like, this website is not to my liking. There's a silly example. You and I were talking about it, a few days ago, where we make a lot of food at home, and recipes have their ingredient, the amount listed at the top, and then they just go like, put this much pepper or put the pepper, and then it's like, well, I don't remember how much pepper. You have to scroll up and down. I just shared the whole tab with Gemini and Chrome, and be like, can you rewrite the recipe so that it actually takes the actual amounts of the ingredients and puts it in there. So I can't go and rewrite the website, but I can at least shape it to my own liking. And those are the things that were possible before, but it would be more work for me to copy paste the URL and do these other things, versus now I can just talk to Gemini and get it to give me, help me in the right direction that I'm trying to go in. You can, it keeps the chat history, so you can like do something and say your Google Sheets or something, and then go do something else in your, Slack or whatever. If you're working across different applications, since the history is preserved, it can actually help guide you through some very ops workflows as well. So big fan. I've been, telling anyone at work who has access to go use it. You guys talk about Claude a lot, so part of this, I guess, is me trying to balance with some like Google has some cool stuff too. Maybe you'll need to have someone from like someone who's a big OpenAI fan next, and they can balance it out with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I use Firefox for most part, and I do use its AI integration feature. But I'll have to check out Google, Chrome, and Gemini. I think what I really like about anti-gravity is it has that browser automation built in.
Yep.
So I can only see it being just as nice in the browser itself. It's never occurred to me to do something like, double the recipe amount on a page. But yeah, of course it could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great tip. I'll go and check it out. All right. Time for posts of the week. We got 2 posts this week. The first one is from the Engineers Codex. It's a Substack I've been following for a while now. The title is called "Everyone is a Staff Engineer Now," and the short of it is it talks about what we're always talking about how AI assisted software engineering would change the workflow and kind of the nature of the software engineering industry. And this gives a rundown of what are the impacts, what are the ramifications of that, and what kind of engineer in the author's mind would succeed in our new paradigm. So the lists are the following: maintain context across multiple domains and projects, because reading code is harder than writing it, right? And that's one of those things that I think, if it's not a truism before, it certainly is, with agents spitting out thousands of lines of code in less than 4 or 5 minutes. So we need to be able to understand and preserve a very detailed working model of the code base so we can review code quickly. And this could be across multiple domains and multiple projects. The next one is maintain focus in a asynchronous workflow. This one is pretty big for me. Instead of going to a flow state for most part of the day, you either have to batch your AI tasks, spend your time writing prompts and providing context, and then wait for the agent to run, or you just kind of have to like split your days into many different parts of writing context and then checking the work. And that is a new skill that you have to learn. And to go from flow state to constantly interrupted is something that I think we all are already impacted by this, but it's going to be even more of an issue going forward. The next one is being able to plan and steer agents effectively. This kind of, this is what makes a senior engineer a senior engineer, right? You should be able to have clear instructions, and those same skills when you're writing requirement documents carries right over to writing prompts for agents or managing context for agents. Next item, reviewing and read code, overriding it. We kind of already talked about it. If you're good at reviewing code, your productivity just went straight up. If you're slow or at reviewing code, then it just seems like more painful work that you have to get through when you used to have the flow state. And lastly, engineering is moving up the stack. And this is one that we see all the time. Folks are creating, whether it's plugin, whether it's low-level programs, folks are able to tackle domains that are at first alien to them. So, and as long as we can control the workflow and control the context, we can get more done. So organize, orchestrate, as opposed to doing the groundwork. How did you feel about any of these pieces of advices, comments, observations?
I think some of this makes sense. I think they touched on it very slightly. Let me find where this is because I jumped out. Yeah, one of the things they say under like being able to plan and steer AI agents effectively, they say building a new feature versus updating existing production infrastructure will require drastically different approaches. And that kind of brings me to if we go back to the title of the article, it says everyone is a staff engineer now. And what from their frame, they're saying everyone is a staff engineer now, but the things that they're describing and at writing code, not as much as like owning it in production, because a staff engineer or, any product engineer does much more than like you commit your code, you get it to production, but you also maintain it, you fix it when it breaks. And one of the weaknesses somewhat, or maybe like this is happening and I haven't just went out to look for as many examples, is when things break, how confident are you that you can go and fix them? And then how usually like if there's simple failures, like maybe the agents would be able to solve that. But if there are multiple complicated things that collide and then you end up getting some failure that an agent just doesn't have enough context to solve, you need people who have made some of these mistakes by themselves, right? Some mistakes you just have to make on your own. You can't learn from reading articles and like having the agents teach you. And so that's the part that I think the article was missing a little bit, is there is more to a staff engineer than the pieces they described. And I'm only talking about the like when stuff breaks, who do you call piece? But there's also like all sorts of organizational buy-in. Part of staff engineer's job is actually like going and convincing people across their org to use AI and use agents and everything. So, to be able to evaluate these different things and be able to standardize so that everybody can have their own agents.md and everything, and agents can have much more context across these different things. So some of that I think the article was lacking in, but I guess the headline, everyone is kind of a staff engineer, is not as catchy as everyone's a staff engineer now.
Yeah, or everyone has responsibilities that used to belong to a staff engineer. It's less catchy.
Yeah, like on the positive side, what they're calling out is what's true now, which is like even if you're a junior engineer, you're expected to do a senior staff engineer's work, because that's what the state of the world we're in. Which means you have to own a lot more, you have to learn a lot more. And so it does improve, or it does like the expectations are just much more higher and you have to go learn all these things. So yeah, that was a positive piece from it. One other thing that jumped to me was like they're saying junior engineers are expected to be staff engineers, and all the time we read these articles about junior engineers lamenting there's no jobs out there, and us reading about how like people are not really getting hired and everything because entry-level jobs are like not as people are not hiring for them as much. And so it's just there's something there about either you don't get hired, or even if you get hired, you are supposed to compress decades of experience within a year or less or whatever.
Yeah, on the bright side for the juniors out there, AI also makes learning 10 times
Absolutely.
easier. They do have a heads up in the terms of having more time.
Yeah.
Than some of the more senior engineers to ramp up and learn.
Also, not having strong opinions that you just are stuck to because that's just how you've done things. So there's a lot of there's nothing against that, and
right.
There are benefits to having people who are not scarred by anything and are just very hardworking and everything and have a lot of agency that they exercise.
They haven't learned that spaces are way better than tabs yet. We need to
Save it for
include
when
them.
Dan is back.
I see. You have no opinion. Okay. Well, on that note, our next post of the week is the 2025 letter by Zhendong Wang, a research engineer at Google DeepMind in London. He works on post-AGI questions and Gemini.
Yeah. There's so a little background on this. I recently read, I think he has posts going, or his letters going starting, what are we looking at? 2022, I think was when he published his first letter, and he talks about he's shamelessly by his own admission, he's I really like what Dan Wang, this person who wrote the breakthrough book about the U.S.-China race and everything, about
can we just talk about how great that book is?
Yeah.
I assume you read it.
Yeah.
Great book. Loved it.
Yeah, and Dan also he does his he didn't do an annual letter last year, but he did one this year, which came out I think 4 days ago or so. I think he does it on the first of every year. So anyways, I think I'm gonna butcher this name a little bit. Zhang Dong, is that how you say it?
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce it without knowing the characters anyways. So
Okay. Yeah. And so he really likes how Dan does his annual letters and wants to model that behavior. So he's written a few of these in the past. And then I was reading through his latest one. I'll read through, this is going to take a couple minutes. What I want to read through are, there's 3 paragraphs at the beginning that I thought were really interesting. And then he goes through how he got to DeepMind and everything and his thoughts on compute. But one of the most thought-provoking parts was in the beginning. We want to think about our future with AI, but to think about the future, let's think about what's happened in the last 10 years. So here we go. Steep yourself in the last months of 2015. The program AlphaGo has just defeated the European champion in Go, the first time a computer has ever beaten a human professional. The 18-time world champion Lee Sedol would be quite unmoved, remarking that the level of the player that AlphaGo went against in October is not the same level as me. And then parentheses, AlphaGo would defeat Lee the following March, so 5 months later. Elsewhere in the world, there's war in Ukraine, SpaceX landed its Falcon 9 for the first time, Star Wars The Force Awakens premiered, a new startup called OpenAI was founded. If you think it through, you won't be surprised to learn that in 2025, programs using natural language under human time controls will win gold medals at the International Math Olympiad and the International Collegiate Programming Contest. Computers will be competing there because they'll have already passed the bar and the MCAT years ago. Lawyers and doctors will still have their jobs though, and global real growth will be gently slowing. Coding agents will, and there's a emphasis on coding as the job. Coding agents will have changed that job forever. A Chinese firm will draw comparisons to Sputnik. A new pope will name himself after Leo XIII, explicitly to respond to, quote, another industrial revolution and to developments in the field of artificial intelligence, end quote. In your whole and consistent view, we'll point out that AI data center investment will account for over 90% of US GDP growth in the first half of 2025. A few companies everybody knows will together spend more than the cost of the entire Apollo program, inflation adjusted, in 10 months. Yet, in the general public, opposition to data centers will shape up to be a new bipartisan rallying cry. That will partly be because of a frozen labor market with neither hiring nor firing, though no one will know if that's due due to AI. One lab will offer at least one AI researcher $1 billion. He will turn it down at first. Then attendees enjoying organic British ballotine. At President Donald Trump's unprecedented second UK state banquet, in parentheses, yes, dear time traveler, you heard that right, will include Demis Hassabis, Sam Altman, and Jensen Huang. I'll end there. You can link to the whole letter. He talks about the bitter lesson and how there's still like people still haven't completely learned it as much, and like the power of compute. It was bananas to think about in the past 10 years. Some things have changed and some things have not to a certain extent. The Ukraine war was the first thing that jumped out, that there was a war in Ukraine back in 2015, and there's a different one that's happening right now. And then Trump's been president twice in the past 10 years. And so how much the world has changed in that time. And then also like you look at, the 18-time world chess champion going like, yeah, that guy was whatever. And then within 5 months, the AlphaGo ends up beating him as well. And so it's crazy the amount of progress. And it's crazy to think that OpenAI, which is now like synonymous with a lot of the like improvements we've seen in the AI industry, was only founded within the last 10 years. So yeah, this really jumped out to me on how like fast the field has moved and how much has changed, and yet how some things have not changed.
Yeah, and I really love using this as a way to maybe not predict the future, but to come up with the right model to think about the future.
Yep.
It's like how Charlie Munger was always the one that always says, to reverse, always to reverse.
Yep.
And I like this approach of reversing and then applying that to the future.
Yep.
It sounds like you're predicting that there will still be a war in Ukraine 10 years from now. Maybe that's
Just
the case.
that some things are, some things don't change as much. I hope there's no war in Ukraine or anywhere else, but as the saying go, geography is destiny. And so some of these things you end up seeing it over and over again through no fault of Ukraine.
Yep. And of course, Trump will still be on his third term. We're not going there. Oh, robot Trump.
Yeah.
That's it.
It
Yeah.
will include Demis Hassabis, Sam Altman, and Jensen Huang. And
Yes, in their robot forms. Well, let's do a little vibe and tell. Speaking of where AI is currently, you've recently worked on a technical writing agent project at work. And we should mention we already did, but you're the director of engineering, Functionize?
Functionize is a test automation company. So what we do is we focus things that are manually tested today. And so you can think about, manual QA testers testing all sorts of different parts of an application that are complicated and cannot be automated easily. And we build our own models in-house. And so one of the things I like to talk about with candidates is my test for if they want to work in AI, my test for a true native AI company is if you take AI out, the company ceases to exist. And so you always see like LLM wrappers and stuff, and then you look at like companies that are fundamentally built on AI. So yeah, we're a company fundamentally built on AI. You take AI away, the company doesn't exist. And we do this for a number of Fortune 500 companies. Yeah, it's a great fun to be able to use AI to be able to automate different things that were just not possible to be automated before. And going into the technical writer agents, since we're an AI company, I'm continuously thinking about not just building customer facing products that are leveraging AI to make their life easier, but also internally, how can we leverage AI to really be able to, have the best team possible, be as great as a company as possible. And so what happened was a few months ago, the technical writer on our team, they departed. When I was looking at our docs and everything, I started thinking about actually use AI to be able to like create a whole flow here where we can create technical docs that you can generate using all the like different inputs, not just your code base or what your product looks like.
Hmm.
So I spent some time. This was a vibe coded. I do not recommend vibe coding things in production that you have to maintain, because going back to everyone's a staff engineer, even if you do it, you have to then like when things break, you have to go fix them, or take ownership of like, anything that you're vibe coding. For internal apps, the way I look at them is they're great candidates to be able to do these things, because the stakes are much lower. You can you have a lot more margin for even if the thing breaks, it is okay, because there's no like customers relying on it, or it's not in any critical path or anything. So I started looking at how do you actually even get the source material to write
Right.
documentation, and then all the way to how do you, publish your documentation that can then be used and everything. And one of the things that I've realized is, and this kind of goes maybe to the everyone says is a staff engineer now article as well. Part of the trick is not just like working on smaller tickets or like smaller scope things, but be able to map out whole processes and whole like jobs end to end, to be able to then see. The obvious thing you can do is you can just use AI to be like, which parts can I automate and where do I need the human in the loop? Because those are bottlenecks that I need to resolve using humans. Another way you can look at it is like maybe having AI means you can reconfigure the whole thing a little bit so that you can redefine the whole process so that it's optimized for an AI to be able to work on it. And then you still have maybe you still have humans at some point, but it's not the same process as what you would have done if it was a process run by a human. So I started looking at where does our source material come from? Comes down to Slack is always a great for anyone who uses Slack or Microsoft Teams or
Right.
anything. There's a lot of information in chat that could be public. Should you if you chose to make it public, or you need to have someone who's very vigilant in all these channels, whose job it is to make the documentation up to date, or someone who is like who has that mindset of like, hey, this can be public and everything. There are other things, like one of the biggest sources of, hey, this should be public information, are support tickets. And that was one of our big sources here. Is customers ask a lot of questions that once you answer the question, or even before answering the question, like the thing that I always ask myself is, how could we have proactively addressed this either in our product, or if you can't like throw a whole essay on something in the product through your documentation, um, how could we have proactively addressed this? Because if you're getting a support ticket, then like that's generally not the end state that you're striving for. The customer already, like, people don't want to reach out to support
Yeah.
unless they're stuck on something. And so what I did was, I use Cursor as my ID at work. I planned out this process of, hey, I would like to create a documentation agent. These are the main sources that I'm looking at. And I would like multiple ways to be able to do this. I set up my Zendesk credentials and everything so that we could pull in support ticket data. We also use the Zendesk knowledge base to be able to publish our blog posts and everything.
All right.
So I hooked it up so that I could pull in the ticket information, raw information that had like all the different comments and everything, scrub out the anything sensitive information from there, generate documentation from it, and then post it as a draft to Zendesk. Now, if you try and do that as a person, like I wouldn't be able to get through, more than a handful of tickets a day, because it's a lot to like take a whole ticket, and sometimes the conversations run over the course of days, weeks, months, even, and you have to like
Mm.
parse all of that to figure out what is the core piece here.
All right.
And so that was one of the things that really got sped up. The other thing I did was I downloaded our external knowledge base, and then asked Gemini to like suggest how do I find similarities so that we don't, like, it doesn't end up creating articles that are already existing in the knowledge base, and you don't need to like
Interesting.
publish duplicates. And so created this semantic similarity
Right.
algorithm where you take the first 500 words, the heading plus the like n number of words. And then if they're semantically similar, I forget if it's like a by point 0.9 or more, then it's similar. And then if it's less than that, then you create, and I think you can define that, and then you create a new article.
Right.
So at this point, I knew what what we already had published and what we had candidates that or like data we could look into to publish these things. And then the final piece was like, how do we go about automating it? So I got it working locally. I worked with one of my engineers to deploy it internally, and now we have one of our um, people in support who actually is able to, and there's like this could further be optimized. Today what we're doing is you could give our docs agent a support ticket or even like a manual chunk of text. Let's say you and I are talking about something related to product. There's some like useful information. You can just literally copy paste the whole thing into the text box and say, can you generate customer facing docs from it? And it's able to do that. And it's able to post a draft Zendesk article. And then all you have to do is go and review it. If it looks great, you hit publish. One thing that I think this can all be automated, I haven't figured out is, I just haven't looked into it enough, is there's this concept of like sections and categories in Zendesk knowledge base.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't end up in the right category that we would want them to. But I'm sure like it's not a big deal to figure that out. And some optimizations that we haven't done yet are, do we even, Slack, I think, has enough conversation that you need to pay specific, you need to like, pull in a specific text into the agent. But for Zendesk tickets and everything, you could take it level further in optimization, and you could use an agent to look through every ticket, categorize them, and can this be turned into external documentation or not, automatically generate documentation from it. And then it simplifies, our teammates' workflow even further, where he doesn't even have to like look through tickets or anything to give them to the agent of like generate docs for this one. All he has to do is review the drafts that are getting posted, and then anything that's worth it gets published, anything that's not gets discarded. And so how do you close that loop? I haven't figured out yet of like, we ended up discarding this one. Here's the reasons why, because I think that um, could help, but I think that's, that would be premature optimization. Right now,
Yeah,
we're just able to do a lot with our teammate who also works on support.
right. So how do you, I guess, have you run into any kind of context issues? These tickets can have, images, videos. I can imagine all kinds of additional multimedia stuff coming from Zendesk.
Yeah,
Did you find you have to do any kind of chunking of the text or of the ticket or anything like that?
I did. There's audio, not as much video once in a while, but what happens is it hasn't been, so we don't really like parse videos in the agent or anything. The reason why is, even if I send you a video over a Zendesk ticket, in future references, either me, the user creating the ticket, or one of our support agents ends up actually like describing what happened in the video of like, hey,
Mm,
you mentioned that, step XYZ had this problem. Because at the end of the day, we have to like, hey, this is the part I'm talking about. And so that surprisingly, and that, and, again, like we're not starting from no knowledge base at all. So we have enough that I think the agent can build on top of that. And so if we haven't felt the need to actually be able to like parse what's going on in videos or anything like that. Maybe in the future that might become a problem, but for now, there's a lot we're finding where we can create documentation for things where all you need is a, plain text from like tickets or from Slack conversations or anything like that, or from some internal docs that come from your product specs or something, but you take away all the technical details and internal details, and you can easily turn those into external docs.
right. So it's almost like the tickets have already managed your context for you before you even kind of have to worry about, doing that additional management for videos.
Yep.
Another question I have is, what about the code base itself? Because it needs to know about the code, or is the existing knowledge base sufficient to kind of create these posts?
Existing knowledge base is sufficient. We do pull in images once in a
Hmm.
while when needed to be able to give the model or give the agent more context. It hasn't needed access to the internal code base. The thing that, and I think I thought about it as a future optimization. The problem ends up being is you have to point it to the latest, like your main branch or whatever, right? But we don't do like continuous deploys or anything. So it's not like as soon as you commit something, it'll get deployed to production. So your documentation would be referring to the latest version of the product. And so you have to
Right.
then the other thing you have to like solve with Git tags or branches or whatever is the version of the product I'm generating documentation for. This is the code for that. And also like our code is across multiple repos. So you have to like, account for all those different things as well. So I think we might end up doing that one day if needed. For now, it's given us a lot of like things to work with that we haven't needed to like even some of the other optimizations I mentioned. We haven't needed to go down that path.
Right. And are we talking about a single agent? Do you have like multiple agents being orchestrated, pulling various data? Like if you use an orchestrator, like what are you using?
No, single agent.
Single agent?
Yeah. And I ended up using Vertex so that GCP has Vertex so that you can swap between different models and everything. Some of the other things were like, small things that you run into of like, oh, you've exceeded the context window and everything. And so I had to be like, optimize that piece. But yeah, other than that, it wasn't. One other thing that it has been useful for is there are things that you want to create external documentation for, but there's also like, people have internal knowledge base and everything for like things that you don't want to maybe necessarily have external documentation for. It has also been very helpful with that, where instead of like, I don't know how many chats you can pin in Slack or how many like, the search is good, but it's not like magical that it'll tell you exactly what you're looking for. And so you can also like take different sources and you can use that as, internal knowledge base generator as well. And then we've been able to use it for like some internal things as well, which before someone would have had to like take the pains to summarize the whole thing and then put it in a form that other people could use.
Right.
Yeah.
And you like how much day-to-day programming do you do these days?
Not much. So being um it ends up being these internal tools that I could build to like we did this for documentation. There are some other tools that I built for our support team. They're like internal tools to be able to like pull data and everything. So that's what I end up spending my time on. Or like, it's either that or doing some craze in production to be able to look up some stuff that we don't have like um, any UI layer or anything built out for. So, which, so that's what I end up spending my time on usually these days.
Yeah, I think this is like a great showcase for how vibe coding allows a lot of roles in the organization, the
Yep.
PMs, the designers, to get back into programming or get into programming for the first time, right? Like
Yep.
it really opens up it reduces the friction so much that you get to create tools and new workflows for things that's like always been so far out of reach that it doesn't
Yep.
even make it onto the maybe someday list, because that
Yeah, I
is just
agree.
like out of the question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this was like an AI engineer video where they were talking about the traditional model of building product where you like have your PRD, you plan everything out, you create like prototypes and everything. You iteratively build things and everything. And how that's changing with these agents is now, before it was like, I forget the term they use, but like you plan everything and you like, tell me the story or anything. And
Hmm.
now it's very much like, show me the prototype. You can do these things so much faster that instead of like spending a lot of time, writing out every single thing, that it needs to do and all these different things. And then like, spending weeks on all sorts of different versions and everything. Iterate quickly and picture paints 1,000 words. So like a working application is giving you worth 1,000,000 words of something that you would have done otherwise. And so, like you said, the people talk about like agency a lot, and to a certain extent, it now very much is the overcoming of our own barriers that we set for ourselves. And like these things are not as hard anymore. And yes, they used to be hard, but now a lot of the barriers that we're putting up are of our own creation. Especially when if you're creating internal tools, if you're creating like throwaway prototypes or anything, it's perfectly fine to be able to use these things. And if people are not doing that, that's not a technological bottleneck. It's you have to work on like mental bottlenecks on why that might not be happening.
Yeah, it almost sounds like, what agile in
Mhm.
quotes, but the agile manifesto version of agile is meant to be quick,
Yep.
iterative, with stakeholders and daily feedback. So
Yep.
yeah, I think it's a blessing for the industry, really.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that experience.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's get to our favorite segment. That was used to be Dan's favorite I mean, it's Dan's favorite segment, but I also like it. 2 minutes to midnight, where we have a conversation about where we are in the AI bubble cycle, to borrow an analogy from the nuclear clock during the Cold War. So we were 2 weeks ago, we were at 1 minute and 30, and midnight is when the bubble bursts, of course. And we were at 1 minute and 30. It was actually an optimistic note for the end of the year.
Yeah.
And we have two articles this week. One called from the Register called "AI Faces Closing Time at the Cash Buffet," where it talks about how the tech industry is burning through essentially $1.5 trillion on AI, and that is more than the cost of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, or it's around the same spending. And they are starting to get pullbacks from corporations. So here's, and I quote, "Notoriously dual economists with Apollo Global Management Trusted Slog said in October that there is essentially no growth in corporate capital spending, quote, outside of AI. While other economists have said AI investments are the only thing that is keeping the US out of a recession."
This goes to, by the way, Wang, he was doing, I think it was, that's what I was listening to. His 2025 letter, I think, either there or one of his podcasts that he's done about the book. This paragraph right there of, the AI spending is what keeping us, the US, out of a recession. That was something that he was talking about as well, is do you really want to be a country that is monomaniacally focused on one thing? Or do you want to actually do like push the boundaries on a lot of things, and you want to have like this is one of the things that we should be doing, but there's a lot of other things that we should be doing. There's this smaller scale version of this as well, where Chicago, I think, is the most diversified economy, the city economy, because only like 13% or something, it was one of the larger industries, but it has like, between universities and between all the different industries and everything, it doesn't have all its eggs in one basket. Versus we all, talk about Detroit, and you see this with like other cities as well, where if you have the one thing and the one thing is not hot for a while, then you suffer a lot as the people whose identity was tied to that one thing. And so that's what this reminded me of, like is it, we shouldn't diversify too much, maybe, I guess, uh, you know, as Charlie Munger used to say, but maybe a little bit is not bad.
Well, if AGI is around the corner, it's not bad. But this article also says that 25% of surveyed enterprises are delaying AI spending into 2027. Is this potentially the turning point where companies are starting to pull back because there hasn't been any fundamental shifts that is AI other than AI spending, I suppose. Of course, companies that completely rely on AI like yours will be the exception here. But if we do start seeing existing enterprise customers start pulling back on AI spending, then we might be in for a rough time, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah. And the second article we have here that's from the New York Times, titled "As AI Companies Borrow Billions, Debt Investors Grow Wary." And this one is about how data center builders, especially the case they talked about here is Applied Digital. The company had to pay as much as 3.75% above similarly rated companies because they are a data center company that services, I believe, CoreWeave, which then sells the compute capacity
Mm-hmm.
to the rest of the FANG companies. It seems like the stock market is still, melting up, but the bond investors are not happy with the amount of construction risk that these data center construction companies are asking for. In this case, Applied Digital received a double B rating when it sold $2 billion worth of debt, and double B is not terrible, but it's not great. It's definitely not triple A. And I think a lot of investors, especially debt investors, are only looking at the downside of the debts not being paid back rather than the upside because they don't get anything
Yep.
if the data center does extremely well.
Yep.
So I personally don't think this is super controversial. Maybe it's a little lower than I expected, but with all the bubble talk in the air and considering that the debt investors don't get to partake in the upside, I think that this makes sense and not necessarily a sign that everything's about to collapse.
Yeah, I read this book, I think it came out last year, about tech bubbles versus financial bubbles. And I think, I don't see, whenever I read these talks about bubble versus not bubble, I don't see it being referenced directly, but I get the sense that like anyone who's talking about that has read the book or read a review of the book or whatever. The book is Boom by Bern Hobart and Tobias Huber. And what they talk about is like you get the technological bubbles they go through, like the Manhattan Project was a bubble, we talk about all the broadband that got laid, the train lines that we laid and everything. All of these were bubbles. And they do in the short term cause chaos and people lose their jobs. In the long term they cause prosperity. And so like versus financial bubbles where there's no like the underlying world hasn't changed, right? So like the housing bubble is one of the examples they give where like the house is not going to produce magically a baby house or something if you invest more in it. And so the concept makes sense to me. And so whenever I look at the who's worried about the bubble and who's not worried about the bubble, one of the things that I feel like the big tech companies are not worried about the bubble because they are big tech companies and they are critical enough. Even in a bust, we will still be using Amazon and its products. We will still be using Google and its products. People who are on social media would still be using one or more of Facebook's products and everything. And people still be playing video games and stuff, even if you're not training models. And so like self-driving cars, so NVIDIA's GPUs would still be doing well and all that. And so the reason why I bring that up is the person concerned about the bubble, the big tech companies I don't think are concerned about the bubble because yes, things would be bad in the short term, but would be fine in the long term, and they'll be able to like create much more value, capture much more of the market if they actually are able to build all these things out now. Bubble or not, I think they're gonna keep pushing for it as much as they can because down the road is what they're looking at versus obviously like people who invest in the market. You don't want to pay $100 for something and it goes down to $20 tomorrow. If that's where, how you're looking to grow your wealth or something, those are the things where the concern is coming from and it's valid. And so it's just been a good framework to look at these things and why I at least yet don't get any sense of from the big tech companies of like we're in a bubble. And even if we are, I don't think they're gonna uh, be saying that because I think they see this as a technological bubble, and they see this as a fundamentally good thing versus a financial bubble where nothing good happens for most of the people unless your job is to be on Wall Street and then you still make a killing.
I agree with you that Boom is a good book, although I'm only 25% of the way in, and that the future of AI is bright. Right? Otherwise, why are we doing this show? But I do think that in the short run, if you have, and again, none of this is financial advice. We're just talking crap about the AI bubble, and it is purely a financial bubble. I looked at Tesla's PE today, and it is 300. So, I mean, I haven't checked the videos in a second, but I think Tesla is purely running on AI and robotics on that high to reach that 300 PE. So in that sense, I do think as far as my 401k and my stock portfolio is concerned, I do care that potentially there is a not potentially. I do believe there's a bubble, like there is the cable network bubble in the 2000s. The 10 years I'm bullish. 2 years maybe not so much.
And part of it is also this is more just like people financially smarter than me would know better, but like if tech keeps growing and more of the S&P 500 is concentrated in tech and a lot of people put their retirement funds or whatever in S&P 500 and tech is reliant on AI, then the cause for concern ends up being much more because then the direction of AI and your personal finances are tied much more closely versus if you invest in different types of portfolios or something. Part of the like tricky part is AI is not like a vertical slice. It is gonna cut across everything, and so you'll have to figure out what non-tech means to protect yourself from AI and whatever.
Yeah. Again, not financial advice. Do you think we've moved closer to the bubble bursting? Purely in terms of the financial stock market sense.
Don't watch it enough. I'll stick with your minute 30 seconds.
All right, a minute 30. We can deal with a minute 30. We're probably
Happy New Year. We'll start it positively.
We might stay at minute 30 until Dan comes back and come up with some doomer takes. We'll see. Well, a minute 30 it is, and that is the show, folks. Well, thank you for joining us again for our study session this week. If you like the show, if you learned something new, please share the show with a friend. You can also leave us a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. It helps people discover the show, and we really appreciate it. If you have a segment idea, a question for us, or a topic you want us to dive deep into, shoot us an email at humans@adipod.ai. We love to hear from you. You can find the full show notes, transcripts, and everything else mentioned today at www.adipod.ai. Thanks again for listening, and we will catch you on next week's episode, maybe. Rahul, do you have any final words?
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.